This is the Trek Domane SL5. So I bought it about 5.5 months ago. I've done about 1,500 kilometers on it. The reason why I bought it is because I'm training for an Ironman 70.3. So this is my very first road bike because I bought this to train the Ironman. And if you do want to follow me on my journey, I've got a playlist of all the videos that I've ever filmed from zero to Ironman. I'll drop those in a link in the description below. So this is a review of the Domane SL5. What I'm not going to do is just read you through the specification list because you can check that out on the manufacturer's website. What this video is what the Domane is actually like to live with day to day. The first thing that I noticed as soon as I hopped on the bike was just how smooth it rides. I was expecting, because it's quite a fast road bike, to be able to feel every single bump in the road. That wasn't the case. So I purposely bought the Trek Domane and not a super fast race bike because I wanted a bike that was relatively comfortable. So that's why I didn't buy the Emonda or the Madone, and I bought the Domane because I wanted something a little bit more comfortable. And this bike is ridiculously comfortable. I can do 100 kilometers and not have any back pain at all, and actually be feeling okay after 100 kilometers. One of the reasons is because of the ISO speed here, which decouples the frame from the seat itself, so it absorbs some of the bumps from the road. I did upgrade the bike with these P0 race TLRs. These are 28s. The reason being the tires from the manufacturer are not amazing. In fact, they're quite terrible. These are about $100, but one of the best upgrades dollar for dollar that you can buy for this bike, in my opinion. I was a little bit concerned that this bike would be too much of an aggressive position. However, it was so comfortable that I even slammed the stem after about 600-700 kilometers. So I'm going to have this cut off because even with the slammed stem, it is still very comfortable. And one thing that the Domane comes with that I think a lot more bikes should come with is the in-frame storage. It's just so convenient. I don't like having a saddlebag under the seat or carrying spare inner tubes or energy gels on my body. So having all of that inside the frame, I think it's such an underrated feature. And another reason why I bought this endurance bike as opposed to the Emonda or the Madone. And in my opinion, it is a very good looking bike. So there was two versions that I could buy, either this white version or a matte black. The problem with matte black bikes, if you've ever had one, is every single fingerprint, every single mark shows up on the frame. This white bike, well, it's not white, it's like a very light grey, but in my opinion, it looks very nice and it kind of fits with the matte black. So I've got it kind of like matte black and white. And maybe that doesn't matter to you, but this bike is in my living room because I live in a tiny 1-bedroom apartment. So at least to me, it is kind of important that the bike looks half decent. The bike has cable routing inside the frame, which is nice, and a lot of people don't like this because it's inconvenient, but if I'm being honest, a bike mechanic does pretty much all the work on this bike, so it doesn't really bother me. In fact, I quite like it. I did also buy the Blendr System here, so this is the Trek Blendr System where the sat-nav and the light goes, and this was quite expensive for what it is. I think I paid about, for the whole system, maybe $80 or $90 because it's on the rear end as well. So this is the Trek Blendr System. You can see there's two parts to it. There's the top part which the Garmin attaches to, and we've got the bottom part which my Magicshine ALLTY 400 fits to. What I really like about this is that it keeps the cockpit completely clean, and also the Garmin fits flush with the stem, which I just think aesthetically, it looks quite nice. Is it worth it? In my opinion, it is because it keeps the whole cockpit clean, but not 100% necessary. I like it though. So I bought the SL5 instead of the SL6, and I'm going to use my phone here to read off the notes. But I could have bought the SL6, but I would have to spend $1,200 more. So this bike was $3,500, which is a lot of money for a first bike. So I definitely didn't want to spend another $1,200 to upgrade to the SL6. And then all you get really is the Di2 105 12-speed and slightly better wheels, and that's about it. So I bought these EliteWheels from AliExpress for about $350. Incredible, incredible value. In fact, I've got a whole dedicated video on why these EliteWheels are completely disrupting the carbon wheel market, because in my opinion, it is not worth spending, for me, $1,000, $1,500 on some carbon wheels, especially as I've just spent a lot of money on the bike itself. What you can't see from this video and from the pictures on the manufacturer's website, or just pictures in general online of this bike, the paint job looks way better in real life, especially when the sun shines on it, than in the pictures. There's kind of like a depth, a sparkle to it that you can't see in the pictures. It kind of reminds me of like the Range Rover Ice White or the Porsche Cayenne. They've got a very light grey Porsche Cayenne that looks, in my opinion, really nice. And this paint job on the Trek Domane looks very similar to those kind of light grey paint jobs on the Porsche and the Range Rover. And that's one thing that Trek does really well, regardless of which bike you buy. They paint their bikes really nice compared to a lot of the competitors. So those are the pros of this bike. Overall, I absolutely love this bike. It was totally the right decision, and I have no regrets at all for buying this for my first bike. Saying that, I've got a few cons listed here that I've kind of brainstormed before making this video. The first one is this bike was quite expensive considering you only get a Shimano 105. For this price range, I would have loved to see a Shimano Ultegra on this bike. It didn't come with that, which is a bit of a shame. The second con with this bike is because it's not just an outright speed bike, it is on the heavier side, even though it's carbon framed. I think one of the reasons is because it has the ISO speed, which adds a little bit of weight, but also it has in-frame storage and some other kind of components that do add a bit of weight to it. So you're kind of trading convenience and practicality with weight. Still, it is a relatively light bike, just not super light. The third con is the handlebar tape is not wearing amazingly well. Again, for the price that I paid, I would have liked them to have put a little bit higher quality handlebar tape on there. So I'm going to have to replace that in maybe another 500 kilometers or so, which I wouldn't say it's disappointing, but it would have been nice to see better handlebar tape. The next con is that I read a lot of reviews before buying this bike that the seat post tends to kind of slide down over time. And I didn't notice this for the first 3 or 4 months. Until about a month ago, I was on quite a long ride, about 50 kilometers, and about halfway through, I was noticing my legs were not going all the way straight when I was at the bottom of the pedal, and then someone behind me mentioned, Mike, your seat looks a little bit low. So I had a look at it, and it had indeed slipped down. Now, I'm not the heaviest person, I'm not the lightest person, but I'm not the heaviest person, but even when tightening the seat all the way up, it did still slide down a little bit, which was not great. Another tiny con, which maybe just happened with my bike, is the plug here on the top of the frame did fall out, so I need to replace that. It does look a little bit unsightly, and if I leave it like this, I'm sure that water can gather inside here, but yeah, that did fall out. This bike, when it was stock, was a pretty good bike. However, I've done quite a few upgrades. One of the biggest upgrades, as you can probably see, are the carbon wheels. One of the best upgrades I've done. Same with the tires. I don't think I would ever buy a bike and not change the tires out straight away. I spent about $100 on them, but it was night and day difference. It was like riding a bike with no suspension and then changing the tires and then going to a bike with full suspension, if that makes sense. I've obviously got some Magicshine lights on the front and the rear, which I would highly, highly, highly recommend. I love these Magicshine lights. They're about $20 or $30, so not a lot of money, but they're built so well. I bought these relatively cheap Topeak Ninja bottle cages, which have been amazing. However, a few videos ago, I featured some kind of cheap Rafa bottles that I got from AliExpress, which were literally about $5, and I really recommended those bottles. However, last weekend, I was on a ride with some friends and one of the bottles slipped out while we was riding about 30 kilometers an hour. The person behind me, we was riding in formation, the person behind me managed to avoid the bottle on the road. However, the person behind them did not. They hit the bottle and they went into the ditch, and you can't imagine how bad I felt because it was 100% my responsibility because it was my water bottle that fell out. So I've completely lost confidence in using those bottles anymore. I've instead upgraded essentially to these, I think they're about $10 or $15 Topeak water bottles. And what's nice about these, they're very, very tight. And because the bottles and the cages are from the same manufacturer, they've been designed to work together. So you can see there's a ridge here around the bottle, and then the cage has a dip in it. So the dip eat into the cage, if that makes sense. I'm explaining this terribly, but I will add some B-roll to show you what I mean, and it just clips in really nicely. I have full confidence that these are not going to fall out, especially important for group rides. And then a couple of other small upgrades, well, small upgrades, quite expensive upgrades really, the Garmin 840 and some cheaper Shimano clipless pedals. Obviously, it goes without saying, everything that I've just said in this video is my opinion, it's not a fact, but particularly if you don't agree with me, let me know in the comments below. So was the Domane SL5 worth the money? Do I have any regrets? Absolutely zero regrets, worth every single dollar. I think it's an amazing bike, and if you want to find out more about this bike, I made another video, you can click over here where I go through this bike again, but 32 accessories that I also bought in order to get into cycling. You can click on that card. Alternatively, if you want to watch my Ironman progress, you can watch this playlist over here.